The moment my fingers closed around that slick, half-empty tube in the glove compartment, my entire world didn't just shatter, it crystallized. Every whispered doubt, every cold shoulder, every perfumed lie snapped into a focus so sharp it could draw blood. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. In the suffocating silence of that garage, a new, colder part of me took control. With a steady hand, I slipped the lubricant into my pocket and replaced it with a tube of industrial-strength superglue. What happened next forced our entire neighborhood to witness the spectacle, culminating in an emergency call to the fire department. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Juliet, and if you're watching this, you need to understand the exquisite, soul-crushing silence that led me here. Please like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want my story of revenge to travel far and wide. That night, the silence in our house was a physical presence, thick and heavy as a wet wool blanket. I sat at the kitchen table, the relentless tick-tock of my mother's old wedding gift clock on the wall, sounding less like a measure of time and more like the countdown to an explosion. My husband of 40 years, Julian, stumbled in from another business dinner. But this wasn't the man I'd built my life with. He was a ghost of him, haunted and hollow. His movements were heavy with a performative exhaustion as he tossed his jacket on the sofa, loosening his tie like it was a noose. He collapsed onto our bed without a word, without a shower, and was soon lost to the world, his snoring a low, mocking hum in the stillness. That's when I smelled it. Beneath the familiar scent of his expensive cologne was something new, a cloying, sweet floral perfume that hung in the air like a brazen confession. It was the scent of my replacement. A cold, morbid curiosity seized me. Moving with the silent precision of a ghost in my own home, I tidied his discarded life, his jacket, his wallet, his old laptop, and then his phone. The screen glowed, a single unread email burning like a neon sign in the dark. My blood ran cold. Julian never used email. He always grumbled, "Juliet, all that tech nonsense is for you young folks." But there it was, a digital ghost from a parallel life. My thumb, trembling with a mixture of terror and resolve, tapped the screen. The message was short, a handful of words that detonated my reality. "You were incredible tonight." "Dad," it was followed by a single crimson heart emoji. "Dad," the word echoed in the hollowed-out chamber of my mind. It wasn't the dad of a child. It was intimate, adoring, a pet name from a lover. A violent shiver racked my body. I felt the ground beneath my 40-year marriage crack open, revealing a dark, secret chasm I never knew existed. I glanced at Julian, sleeping so peacefully, and a fury, cold and sharp, began to replace the shock. My hands shook as I put the phone back, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I continued my robotic cleaning, my fingers mechanically checking his pants pockets. They found a crisp, folded receipt from the Oak Cellar, a lavish steakhouse in San Antonio. "Dated tonight, San Antonio?" He had sworn his meeting was in Dallas. A bitter, silent laugh escaped me. The receipt was for a party of two, a bottle of expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, the very wine he'd bought to celebrate the opening of my first bakery a decade ago. The memory, once so golden, now felt tarnished and cheap. I documented everything. A quick, silent snapshot of the receipt. A picture of the damning email. This was no longer a suspicion. It was evidence. Then I went to the garage. The air was still warm from his SUV, thick with the mingled scents of gasoline and that sickly sweet perfume. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, searching the driver's seat, nothing. But when I opened the glove box, my fingers brushed against something plastic and slick. I pulled it out, and there, in the stark beam of my flashlight, was the final, tangible proof of my betrayal. A tube of personal lubricant, crusted with residue at the cap. Julian and I hadn't been intimate in years. He'd claimed age had stolen his desire. So who was this for? I stood frozen in the dark, holding the slick, damning tube. The grief was immediate and overwhelming, but it was quickly washed away by a tidal wave of something else, something far more dangerous and determined. A cold, calculated rage. This was no longer just a heartbreak. It was a declaration of war. And I, Juliet, was just getting started. The question, who was this for, echoed in the hollowed-out chambers of my mind, each syllable a hammer blow to the fragile remains of my reality. I felt paralyzed, yet a strange, cold survival instinct took hold. My movements became precise, clinical. I placed the lubricant back in the exact spot, the same angle, the same slight dust disturbance. I wiped my hands on a napkin, scrubbing until my skin felt raw, as if I could erase the slick, greasy feeling of his betrayal. But I wasn't finished. My search became more methodical, a forensic examination of my own life. Under the back seat, my fingers brushed against crumpled napkins. I lifted one to my nose. That scent. It wasn't my soft, familiar rose. This was a loud, cloying, floral perfume, an alien, defiant shout of infidelity in the quiet sanctuary of our garage. It was the same scent that had clung to him last night. I took photos of everything, the lubricant, the napkins, as if I could capture the very essence of the affair in a digital file. It was my only weapon. Back inside, the weight of the evidence was a physical pressure, heavier than any sack of flour I'd ever hauled from my bakery. I picked up Julian's phone again, my hands now steadied by a chilling resolve. I scoured his messages but found only barren work-related chats. His inbox was a ghost town, save for that one damning email. The sent and draft folders were pristine. It was all too clean, too perfect. He wasn't just lying. He was a master curator of his own deception. Overnight, my hot, weeping grief had transformed. It was now a cold, hard stone of rage settled deep in my chest, and alongside it stirred a new, more dangerous emotion, a thirst for the unvarnished truth. No matter how devastating the cost, the next morning I was a ghost in my own kitchen, moving through the motions as a venomous carousel of images. The tube, the receipt, the email spun relentlessly in my mind. I made his breakfast, 2 fried eggs, toast, a cup of the strong black coffee he liked. A performance of normalcy. Julian trudged down, his hair a mess, his eyes groggy with sleep I envied. He took a sip of coffee and delivered his line with practiced ease. "Big meeting today. I'll be late." The casualness of the lie made my blood run cold. I nodded, a strained smile plastered on my face, while every fiber of my being screamed, "Where? With whom? In San Antonio again?" Instead, I simply whispered, "All right, be careful." He gave me a pat on the shoulder, a hollow, dismissive gesture, and left. The click of the front door was the starter's pistol for my new reality. I couldn't just drown in theories. I needed proof, hard, irrefutable evidence. With trembling hands, I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for Mrs. Miller, a dear friend from my early bakery days. She had once told me, "Juliet, if you ever need it." I know a man, Thomas. He's discreet, reliable. I never imagined I'd make that call. My voice was a fragile thread as her phone rang. "Mrs. Miller, it's Juliet. Can you help me get in touch with Thomas? I need him." The silence on the other end was heavy with understanding. "Juliet," she finally said, her voice soft. "What's happened? Did Julian—" "I just need to know the truth," I interrupted, my pride too bruised to say more. An hour later, a text lit up my screen from an unknown number. "Mrs. Roberts, meet me at the Daily Grind Cafe at noon. I will help you." It was a lifeline thrown into my sea of deceit. At noon, I sat in a secluded corner of the cafe, the aroma of roasted coffee, once a comfort, now feeling foreign and sharp. Thomas entered. He wasn't a dramatic figure from a film. He was a middle-aged man in a simple blue shirt, with calm, philosophical eyes that seemed to see straight through the facades people build. I handed him the flash drive. "This is all I have," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I think my husband is having an affair." The words hung in the air, a final, painful admission. Thomas nodded, his expression unreadable. He reviewed the photos on his phone, his fingers making quick notes in a small, leather-bound notebook. "Mrs. Roberts," he said, his voice low and steady. "I understand. I'll begin surveillance on Mr. Roberts this afternoon." "Don't worry," Thomas said, his voice a low, steady anchor in my storm. "I'll contact you as soon as I have something." I looked at him, the tears I refused to shed, burning like acid behind my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered, the words feeling fragile. "I just need the truth, whatever it is." His nod was brief, but his eyes held a flicker of profound understanding. "I'll do my best. Go home. Do nothing to arouse suspicion." I walked out into the bustling street, a ghost moving through a world of vibrant, living people. I was wrapped in a loneliness so profound, it was a physical chill. 40 years. A lifetime built on a foundation I believed was granite. Now it was quicksand, and I was sinking fast. The irony was a poison in my veins. I, Juliet, the woman who had built a business from flour and dreams, was now hiring a stranger to shadow the man I called my husband. That night, I sought refuge in my bakery. The familiar, comforting sense of yeast and sugar usually soothed my soul, but now they felt like a mockery. As I mechanically reviewed delivery invoices, my phone vibrated on the counter. A message from Thomas. My heart didn't just pound. It slammed against my ribs, a wild, trapped animal. The blood roared in my ears as I tapped the screen. A single photo loaded. It was Julian in his favorite light blue shirt, standing outside a restaurant with gleaming gold doors. His hand was entwined with a woman's. My world stopped. I zoomed in, my breath catching in my throat. The pixels resolved into a face I knew as well as my own. Allison, my daughter-in-law, but not the Allison I knew. This woman wore a tight little black dress, her lips painted a violent, passionate red, her hair flowing loose and wild. They weren't standing as family. Their bodies were angled inward, a silent, intimate conversation. They held a secret between them, and I was on the outside staring in. I sank into my chair, the phone trembling so violently I feared I would drop it. "Allison, how was this possible?" At family dinners, they were polite, distant ships passing in the night. It had all been a masterful performance, and I was their willing, foolish audience. Another message from Thomas. More photos. A cascade of betrayal. There they were, tucked away in a candlelit corner. Allison was leaning forward, her smile intimate and knowing. And Julian was looking at her with a raw, tender adoration I had never seen in his eyes. Not when we were young, not when I walked down the aisle, not even when I held our son for the first time. That look, a look I had spent a lifetime yearning for, was reserved for her. The pain was a physical crushing in my chest, stealing the air from my lungs. Then at 2 a.m. a video arrived. I fumbled for my headphones, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and pressed play. The scene was the restaurant. Allison leaned in, her lips close to his ear, whispering, a secret for him alone. Julian threw his head back and laughed, a deep, unguarded, joyful sound I hadn't heard in decades. It was the laugh of a man in love. They stood to leave. Ever the gentleman, my husband opened the car door for her, his hand resting on the small of her back. A possessive lover's touch. I replayed it again and again. Each viewing was a fresh laceration, a self-flagellation I couldn't stop. This was my daughter-in-law, the woman I taught to make our families flan. And this was my husband, the man with whom I built a life. The betrayal was so vile, so grotesque, it felt surreal. I saved everything, photos, video, timestamps, onto a flash drive. My hands worked on autopilot, building a case against my own life while my mind shattered. The next morning, I was in the bakery kitchen, the scent of vanilla now smelling like decay. My phone vibrated in my apron. Another message from Thomas. "Mrs. Roberts, more evidence?" I opened it. A new gallery of horrors. First, a photo of Julian leaving a law firm. And there, glued to his side, was Allison in a professional sheath dress and oversized sunglasses. A pathetic attempt at a disguise. They walked in sync, their intimacy a silent scream. The next photo stole the last vestige of my hope. They were standing under the grand portico of a 4-star hotel, the Grand Marquis sign glowing behind them. They looked comfortable, at home, a perfect couple in their perfect secret world. Then the final blow. A video. I press play, my heart a frantic dying bird in my chest. The camera was at a distance, but the image was devastatingly clear. Julian and Allison stood on a third-floor hotel balcony. His arm was wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. She rested her head on his shoulder, her hair dancing in the breeze. And then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, they turned and shared a kiss. It wasn't brief or furtive. It was a slow, deliberate kiss that spoke of familiarity and passion. I replayed it, frame by frozen frame, watching my husband's lips meet my daughter-in-law's. Each pixelated second was a descent into a special kind of hell, meticulously designed to annihilate the woman I once was. The evidence was no longer just undeniable. It was a masterpiece of cruelty, and my revenge would have to be its equal. The hotel room curtain shifted, and Allison emerged onto the balcony, rushing into Julian's waiting arms. Her face was alight with a radiant, unguarded happiness I hadn't seen since she was a bride. She looked like a young woman desperately in love. I slumped in my chair, my fingers turning white as I clutched the edge of the table, the only anchor in a room that was spinning. A new message from Mr. Thomas materialized on my screen. They've rented the room for the afternoon. It appears they are staying the night. I will maintain surveillance. I read the words until they blurred, my throat constricting as if an invisible hand were squeezing the life from me. Just hours ago, Julian had texted me, "Juliet won't be home tonight. Meeting a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest, my love." The tone was so sweet, so caring. A masterpiece of a lie, a partner from out of town. The audacity of it stole my breath. He wasn't out of town. He was in a luxury hotel, a mere 20-minute drive away, wrapping our daughter-in-law in his arms. With robotic precision, I saved every photo and video to my portable hard drive. Each click of the mouse was a nail in the coffin of my marriage. I forced myself to watch the video again, to study the tender way Julian tucked a strand of hair behind Allison's ear. It was a gesture I remembered from a lifetime ago, a ghost of the man I'd fallen for under the San Diego stars. Now, it was a grotesque pantomime of a love that had never truly been mine. I thought of our family gatherings, the perfect tableau of a happy life. Allison always sitting as far from Julian as possible, her face a mask of mild distaste. Our son Daniel would even joke, "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." We had all believed it. We had applauded their performance, never suspecting we were the audience for a carefully choreographed farce. The house I returned to that night was no longer a home. It was a museum of my own naivety. I went to our dresser, my movements fueled by a grim, cold purpose. I printed the evidence, the lawyer's office, the hotel entrance, the balcony kiss, every damning frame. I arranged them neatly, sealed the envelope, and hid it beneath a stack of old family photos at the bottom of the drawer. My eyes fell on one of those photos. The four of us at Daniel's birthday, all smiles and feigned familial bliss. Allison was hugging Daniel and Julian's arm was draped over my shoulder. Looking at it now, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a pure, incinerating rage. Just before dawn, the front door creaked open. Julian stumbled in, reeking of expensive whiskey and that faint, sweet perfume. The partner was relentless, Juliet, he slurred, his eyes bloodshot. I'm dead on my feet. I stood in the kitchen, a glass of water in my hand, watching him paint on his mask of weary businessman. You should rest, I said, my voice a placid lake hiding a volcanic core. You have work tomorrow. He gave my shoulder that same hollow pat and dragged himself to bed. Minutes later he was snoring, the peaceful, untroubled sleep of a man without a conscience. When I was sure he was lost to the world, my phone vibrated. It was Thomas. Mrs. Roberts. His voice was a low, urgent whisper. I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. Special equipment. They were careless. I'm sending it now. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. Send the file, Thomas. The audio file appeared. I put on my headphones, sat in the dark, and pressed play. The first voice was Allison's, but stripped of its usual sweet cadence. It was sharp, ambitious, and cold. We need to move faster with that shell company, Julian. I want that bakery chain. I want that old hag out of our house. The words were a physical blow. I gripped the phone, my knuckles cracking. Then Julian's voice, deep and utterly confident. Relax, my love. The paperwork is handled. Juliet is clueless. She trusts me blindly. It wasn't just an affair. It was a corporate takeover of my life. They weren't just stealing my husband. They were plotting to seize my bakery, every recipe I'd perfected, every hotel contract I'd fought for, every ounce of my soul I'd poured into it. Julian, who had never so much as frosted a cupcake, was planning to hand it all to her. I didn't break. A new, terrifying clarity settled over me. I saved the audio file with the rest of my evidence, meticulously labeling it. I was no longer a victim. I was an archivist of their treason. The next morning, as I mechanically prepared coffee in my bakery, another message came from Thomas. New photos, taken with a powerful telephoto lens. There they were, in the front seat of Julian's car. A thick stack of legal documents was spread across the dashboard. Allison, with a determined glint in her eye, was marking up the pages with a bold red pen, and Julian, sitting beside her, was nodding, a proud, complicit smile on his face. They weren't just lovers, they were co-conspirators, and I now had the evidence to bury them both. Thomas's next message was a blade of ice. I've intercepted more of their plan. They intend to use a contact at a notary's office to facilitate the transfer. I will dig deeper. I zoomed in on the photo he'd sent. The words on the document were a blur, but their intent was crystal clear. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a corporate raid on my life. They were methodically plotting to seize the empire I'd built from flour and sweat. I sat there, surrounded by the warm, sweet aroma of fresh pastries, and felt the foundations of my world crumble into dust. I reopened the audio file, the headphones sealing me in a chamber of horrors. That wretched old woman, Allison's voice, laced with contempt, echoed in my skull. I remembered the young woman who had joined our family, who I'd taught to make my mother's rice recipe, who I'd hugged like the daughter I never had. And Julian, my Julian, the boy from San Diego who promised me the world. They had made a laughingstock of my love, a monument to my foolish faith. A regular customer, Mrs. Peterson, approached the counter, her smile warm. Juliet, the bakery is thriving. Your chain is expanding. I'm so proud of you. I forced a smile, my face a rigid mask. Thank you. I'm doing my best. But inside, I was screaming. If only you knew. Would you see a successful businesswoman or just a pathetic fool? That night, under the sickly yellow glow of the kitchen light, Julian played his part to perfection over dinner. Juliet, I have some important business papers to sign this week, he said, his tone casual, almost bored. Perhaps you should look them over. They're a bit complicated. The audacity was breathtaking. He was dangling the bait, testing my gullibility. I picked at my food, Allison's voice a phantom in my ear. Hurry up and sign the fake contracts. I gave him a thin, weary smile, the performance of a tired, trusting wife. Yes, I'll look at them later. I'm just so tired tonight. He nodded, satisfied, and took a sip of his wine. Behind his calm eyes I saw the predator, patiently waiting to devour everything I owned. He drank more, his face flushing, slurring stories about a difficult client. I nodded along, my every cell vibrating with the need to scream, "Do you think I'm an idiot?" When he finally staggered to bed, leaving his car keys gleaming on the nightstand, I saw my opportunity. It was a siren's call. I moved slowly, a ghost in my own home. Each step was a bridge burned, a farewell to the woman I used to be. I snatched the keys, their cold metal a shock against my palm, and marched straight to the garage. The world outside was silent, holding its breath. Inside, the SUV sat like a beast, reeking of gasoline and that cloying alien perfume. I opened the glove box, and there it was. The tube of lubricant, cap slightly askew, a dried sticky residue at its tip, a vulgar testament to their ongoing deceit. Holding it felt like holding a live wire of pure fury. In the kitchen, I scrubbed my hands with lemon soap, the sharp scent failing to cut through the stench of betrayal. Then I opened the tool drawer. My eyes fell on the tube of clear, industrial-strength superglue, the same kind I'd used to fix a bakery chair. A tool of creation, now repurposed as an instrument of retribution. With the steady hands of a surgeon, I unscrewed the cap of the lubricant. Slowly, meticulously, I filled it with the viscous, clear glue, drop by deliberate drop. I wiped the nozzle clean. A test squeeze proved it flowed with a perfect deceptive smoothness. A faint, cold smile touched my lips. This was no longer just about pain. This was about justice. I returned the doctored tube to its exact place in the glove box, a Trojan horse of my own making. A final check of the trunk revealed more damning evidence. A crumpled bag, an empty bottle, and a lone unused condom. I documented it all, each photo another brick in the wall of my case. Back in the house, I replaced the keys. I picked up a book and sat on the sofa, the pages a blur of meaningless text. I wasn't reading, I was waiting. The first move had been made. The game was now in play. My mind was a vortex of pain and purpose. I thought of Daniel, my sweet, oblivious son, living a lie crafted by the two people who should have protected him most. How could I ever tell him that his wife and his father had built a secret world on the ruins of our family? I thought of my bakeries, 40 years of kneading dough until my hands ached, of fighting for every contract, of defending my dream against Julian's quiet dismissals. I thought he was just unsupportive. Now I knew he was a patient vulture, waiting for my life's work to stumble so he could pick the bones clean with her. An hour later, Julian stumbled into the kitchen for water. His eyes, bleary with sleep and wine, fell on the keys. He showed no suspicion. "Still up, Juliet?" he mumbled. "Just reading," I lied, my smile a placid mask. "Go back to bed." He nodded, drank, and was soon snoring again. I watched him, this stranger in my husband's skin, and felt a cold certainty settle in my bones. His destruction was already in motion. He just didn't know it yet. At dawn, I was in my bakery, channeling my rage into the dough, pounding and folding as if I could physically imprint my fury into every loaf. Back home for breakfast, I played my part. "Julian," I said, my voice smooth as buttercream, "I have to go to Nashville tomorrow to sign a new partner. I'll be late. Can you manage dinner?" I watched him, a hawk studying its prey. He looked up surprised, but his eyes held a glint that wasn't concern. It was triumph. "A big contract?" he asked, taking my hand in a grotesque pantomime of tenderness. "Don't worry about a thing. Go!" That spark in his eyes, that barely suppressed smirk, it was all the confirmation I needed. He was thrilled to have the house to himself. As he left, he forgot his phone on the table. The screen lit up with a missed call. The name made my blood run cold. Allison Thomas. Before I could move, he hurried back, snatching the phone and killing the screen. "Forgot this," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. The slap of his carelessness was more jarring than any physical blow. The pretense was thinning, and his arrogance was showing. That day, I moved through my work like an automaton, but my mind was a steel trap, focused on one goal. I needed to hear their confession in their own voices, in the sanctity of my own home. That night, I feigned exhaustion. "Early bus tomorrow," I told Julian, climbing into bed. "I need to sleep." "Rest, Juliet," he said, patting my shoulder with a liar's hand. I closed my eyes and sharpened my ears. Just past midnight, his snoring ceased. The faint glow of his phone illuminated the room as he slipped out. I was a shadow behind him, hidden by the thick living room drapes. His voice was a low, intimate murmur in the dark. "Yes, of course. Come to the house tomorrow. No more hotels. Juliet will be gone all day." A soft, girlish giggle pierced the silence from the other end. "Allison, that's perfect. Dad, finally we can be comfortable." "Come early," Julian replied, a smile in his voice. "I'll be waiting." I stood frozen, my blood turning to fire in my veins. They weren't just desecrating our marriage. They were planning to defile my home, to turn my son's sanctuary into their adulterous playground. I retreated to the bedroom and retrieved Daniel's old college recorder. With steady hands, I loaded a fresh battery and set it to continuous record. I hid it behind the bookshelf next to the headboard, its tiny red eye obscured by a framed photo from Daniel and Allison's wedding. Their smiling faces, once a symbol of joy, were now a bitter monument to deceit. I lay back down, my body rigid. Julian returned, collapsing into bed with the peaceful snores of a man without a conscience. But my eyes were wide open, staring into the darkness, more awake than I had ever been. When my alarm blared at 5 a.m., the house was a tomb. Only the pale glow of streetlights cut through the darkness. Julian's snoring was a steady, oblivious rhythm. In the kitchen, I stood with a cup of cold coffee, my gaze fixed on the skillet of oil on the stove. This was the final piece of the stagecraft, a simple, elegant trap. I tied a nearly invisible string to the stove's igniter, threading it across the room to the window, where I attached it to a heavy coffee can. A single distant pull would bring the flame to life, igniting the oil and sending a plume of thick black, accusatory smoke into the morning air, a signal that would surely summon the neighbors, and with them the witnesses I so desperately needed. I cracked the window open, a perfect channel for the betrayal to be seen. I tested it once. The oil ignited, the smoke curling upward in a dark, prophetic spiral. I extinguished it just as quickly. Everything was in place. The doctored lubricant in the car, the hidden recorder in the bedroom, the smoke trap in the kitchen. The stage was set. All that was left was for the players to take their places and bring about their own spectacular ruin. I put on my jacket, hoisted my large purse onto my shoulder, and stepped into the role of a wife leaving on a business trip. I entered the bedroom and gave Julian a gentle shake. "I'm heading to the bus station," I said, my voice a masterclass in calm. "This contract won't sign itself." "Don't wait up," he cracked open a sleepy eye. "All right, Juliet. Be careful." Then he buried his face back into the pillow, already drifting toward the trap I had set. I took one last look at the man I had loved for a lifetime, now a stranger sleeping on a pyre of his own making. My heart was a stone, but my resolve was steel. Instead of the bus station, I went directly across the street to Mrs. Peterson's house. She opened the door, her face etched with concern. "Juliet, what's wrong? May I stay here for a few hours?" I asked, my voice tight. "I need to watch my house." She asked no questions, her kindness a stark contrast to the betrayal unfolding nearby. She poured me a coffee and guided me to a chair by the window, a perfect front row seat to the end of my old life. At 10 a.m., a taxi pulled up. Allison emerged, dressed in a flimsy floral dress and oversized sunglasses, a pathetic attempt at stealth. My front door flew open. Julian, looking frantic, yanked her inside. My knuckles turned white around the coffee cup. "It's time," I whispered, and tapped the app on my phone connected to the hidden recorder. The audio flooded my headphones. A live broadcast from my personal hill, Julian. Finally, "We don't have to hide in hotels, Allison." A tinkling, cruel laugh. "You really know how to pick your moments. The old hag is gone, right?" The words, "old hag," spoken with such venom, sealed their fate. Then came the sounds I had anticipated, the creak of the bed, the intimate murmurs. I closed my eyes, breathing through the rage. Just a little longer. Minutes later, the scene shifted. Allison, a sharp panicked shriek. "What the hell is this? Julian, we're stuck." Julian, a low, furious growl. "Shut up, let me see." A cold, grim smile touched my lips. The superglue had done its job. It was time for the finale. I tapped my screen once more, activating the smoke trap. Across the street, I saw the faint flicker of the stove igniting through my kitchen window. Within seconds, thick, black smoke began to pour out in relentless, coiling spirals. Mrs. Peterson gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Juliet, your house!" I feigned shock, but inside I was a placid sea. The neighbors spilled into the street, their shouts creating the perfect chorus of chaos. "Fire! Call the fire department!" And then, the sound I had both dreaded and anticipated cut through the noise. The wail of a siren. A red fire engine skidded to a halt in front of my house. My heart stopped. The first man to leap from the truck, his face a mask of professional determination, was my son, Daniel. "Equipment ready. There could be people inside," he barked, charging toward the door. A searing pain lanced through me. My brave boy, rushing into a fire to save the very people who were shattering his world. I watched, paralyzed, as he raised the sledgehammer and splintered my front door with a single, brutal swing through my headphones. The audio from the bedroom became a symphony of chaos. Allison, "Julian, do something!" "I can't move." "Julian, shut up." "I'm trying." I could picture the scene perfectly. The two of them, trapped in their most intimate and humiliating pose, panic turning to pure terror. Then, a new voice exploded through my headphones, Daniel's voice, but stripped of all its strength, cracked and broken. "What? What is this?" A firefighter behind him muttered, "Oh my God." Another stifled a shocked laugh. Silence. Daniel roared, but that command wasn't for his crew. It was the raw, guttural cry of a man whose entire reality had just been obliterated in a single, horrifying glance. The truth was no longer a secret. It was a spectacle, and the show was just beginning. The humiliation was no longer a private secret. It was a public spectacle, broadcast to the fire team, the gathered neighbors, and soon the world. A firefighter ran out, addressing Daniel. "Chief, the fire's out." It was just a small kitchen fire, contained. But Daniel was lost, frozen in the doorway of the bedroom, paralyzed by the grotesque scene before him. The neighbors pressed in closer, their whispers hardening into exclamations. "Is that Julian and his daughter-in-law?" a woman shrieked, her voice dripping with scandalized glee. Mrs. Peterson, standing beside me, didn't ask for permission. She simply raised her phone, its lens a silent, unblinking eye, capturing every agonizing detail of their struggle. She looked at me, her gaze a mixture of pity and fierce solidarity. "You knew, Juliet. It wasn't a question." I gave a single grim nod. Then Daniel emerged from the house. The sound of his boots on the porch was the toll of a funeral bell. His face was a ghostly mask of shock. From inside, Julian's voice, ragged with panic, carried through the open door. "Daniel, get them out! Close the damn door!" But it was far too late. The entire neighborhood was their audience, a chorus of disdain and morbid curiosity. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law, caught in the act. Poor Juliet. How could they? The firefighters, fighting their own embarrassment, had to act. They swathed Julian and Allison in thin hospital sheets, a flimsy veil over their stuck-together bodies, and carried them out on stretchers. Allison's broken sobs were punctuated by groans of genuine pain. "Please make it stop." Julian could only mumble, "Don't let them see." But they had seen, and they were recording. Looks of revulsion, mocking laughter, and shaken heads followed the stretchers as they were loaded into the ambulance. The siren wailed, a soundtrack to their disgrace. I melted into the crowd, my face a perfect canvas of shock and confusion, as if I'd just rushed back from the bus station. Daniel stood rooted in the yard, his posture broken, his world in ashes. His team couldn't meet his eyes. At the hospital, I played my part flawlessly in the waiting room, the concerned wife. Hours later, a weary doctor approached. "Mrs. Roberts, they're separated. No permanent damage, just some topical irritation. They'll need this special ointment." I accepted the 2 tubes with a trembling hand. "Thank you, doctor." "May I see them?" The moment the nurse turned her back, my hands moved with swift, sure precision. The medical ointment disappeared into my purse, and in its place, I held 2 identical tubes filled with the hottest, most potent mustard I could concoct. I entered their room. "Julian, Allison, are you okay?" Allison buried her face in her hands. Julian stammered, Juliet, I can explain. I didn't let him finish. I placed the tubes on the bedside table with a soft, final click. The nurse said to use this, I said softly and turned to leave. I didn't need to watch. I only needed to listen. Minutes later, a blood-curdling scream tore through the hallway, followed by a string of curses from Julian. It burns! My skin is on fire! What the hell is this? Who did this? The hallway erupted into chaos. Patients peered out of their rooms. An elderly woman pointed. That's them! The ones from the video online. The father-in-law and the daughter-in-law. Another voice, cold and satisfied, added, They deserve it, as doctors and nurses scrambled to neutralize the chemical burn. Their humiliation reached its zenith. Mrs. Peterson's video was already spreading like a virus through the neighborhood and across social media. Their downfall was complete, and the whole world was watching. When the commotion died down, Daniel entered. I had called him, instructing him to bring the thick envelope from my drawer. He handed it to me, his eyes hollow. Inside were the photos, the receipts, the audio transcripts, and 2 copies of divorce papers. I laid the documents on the table between their beds. I looked Julian directly in his pained, panicked eyes, my voice as cold and sharp as shattered glass. 40 years of marriage ends here. Sign these. Then you can disappear from my life. And from our son's life. Allison crumpled, sobbing, reaching a desperate hand toward Daniel. Baby, please. Forgive me. But Daniel didn't even look at her. He just stared at the floor, his silence more damning than any verdict. The gavel had fallen. Justice, cruel and exact, had been served. I made a mistake. Please, I'm begging you, forgive me. Allison's voice was a raw, desperate plea. But Daniel just looked at her, his gaze as hard and unyielding as granite, and walked out of the room without a single word. Julian tried to grab my hand, his fingers trembling. Juliet, listen to me. I never meant for this. I pulled away, the contact feeling like a brand. Don't, I cut him off, my voice flat and final. You made your choice, Julian. You chose this path. His desperate, Juliet, please, echoed behind me as I left, swallowed by the nurse's sharp warning to keep quiet. In the hallway, I found Daniel leaning against the wall, his head buried in his hands, his broad shoulders slumped. I placed a hand on his back. Mom, he whispered, the sound torn from the deepest part of him. Why did it have to be Dad? And why her? I had no answer that could soothe such a wound. I simply pulled him into a tight embrace, letting my silence share the burden of his pain. In that moment, I understood the true cost. Julian and Allison had lost their honor, their marriages, and their twisted dream. But Daniel and I had lost a family. Our victory was carved from a profound and lasting loss. A few weeks later, the bell above my bakery door chimed incessantly. The scandal had morphed into a wave of fierce, local support. Juliet, you are so strong, Mrs. Peterson said, clutching a bag of my flan. The whole neighborhood is behind you. I smiled and thanked her, but inside I knew the truth. This strength wasn't born of power, but of survival. It was forged in the fire of betrayal, tempered from the broken pieces of my own heart. Daniel moved in with me immediately. The cheerful, laughing man he had been was gone, replaced by someone quieter, his eyes shadowed by a grief that wouldn't quickly heal. I want to stay here for a while, he said that first night, a single suitcase by the door. I'll help you with the bakery. Whatever you need. I just hugged him, feeling the solid warmth of the son I had raised. We didn't need words. Our new routine became our salvation. Each morning, I fired up the ovens and arranged the trays while Daniel managed the invoices and client calls. Mom, the Grand Hotel wants to double their pastry order for next week, he'd call out, his voice steady, if not yet bright. All right, I'd reply. Confirm the order. I'll prepare more dough. In these simple shared tasks, we found a peace we hadn't known in years. Dinners were just the two of us, eating simple meals of rice and beans. The air was clear of Julian's lies and Allison's poisoned sweetness. Mom, Daniel asked one night, a faint, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time in weeks. Can you make me your flan this weekend? Only if you help me stir the caramel, I replied, my heart swelling with a fragile hope. He nodded. And in that small, shared promise, I felt the first real threads of our new life being woven. I began to reclaim parts of myself I had neglected for 40 years. I joined a cooking club, where my flan was met with laughter and praise. I returned to church sitting in the quiet, colored light, praying not for vengeance, but for the strength for Daniel and me to move forward. On our walks, Mrs. Peterson would say, "Everyone says you're the one who won." "Juliet," I would simply smile. I had won in a sense, but the trophy was my own survival, and the price had been nearly everything. Slowly, Daniel began to heal. He started sharing stories from his work, his voice regaining some of its old cadence. "We put out a fire at the market yesterday," he told me one evening. "It was a close one, but everyone got out safe." "Please be careful," I said, my voice catching. "You're all I have left." He looked at me, his eyes full of a deep, tender resolve. "Don't worry, Mom, I'm not going anywhere." Those words were a balm. They were an anchor. One afternoon, as the bakery hummed with life and the air grew thick with the scent of rising bread and sugar, I looked around. I saw the legacy I had built with my own hands, from the hopeful girl in San Diego to the woman who had endured the unendurable. Julian and Allison had tried to take everything from me. They failed. I kept my bakery, I kept my son, and most importantly, against all odds, I had kept myself the future. Once a terrifying void now stretched before us, not as a perfect happily ever after, but as a quiet, hard-won peace, built one tray of flan, one shared smile, one new dawn at a time. We were not just surviving. We were, slowly and surely, learning to live again.